Okay, hey everybody. We're going to be focusing on conclusion paragraph techniques now. You had watched the little mini lesson on intro paragraph techniques. Now we'll look at how to wrap up an essay. And very similar, and some of these techniques for conclusion paragraphs kind of mirror some of the techniques to begin your intro paragraph and begin your essays. So before we get into techniques, real quick, think about the last thing you said before class started. Try to think back to a few minutes ago or whenever that was. Now imagine you disappeared in an instant. Poof, you're gone, you vanish. Would you want to be remembered by those words, by those final words? I know it kind of seems a little absurd, but like in this hypothetical scenario, with an essay, you are only as good as your last words. So the conclusion paragraph is really your last chance to leave a good impression and a strong impression on the reader. So to be honest with you, I think the conclusion paragraph is almost, it's if not equally important, it's more important than the introduction. And I think oftentimes we like to skim over it. We get to the end of the essay and we just want to be done with it. So we just kind of like throw something together really quickly and call it quits and turn it in. But I want to go over how you can, end on a strong note. So I'm going to go through some techniques. I'm going to skip over the slides in between the techniques because I have some example paragraphs that use these techniques, but we're going to look at some other ones later on. So if you ever have any, if you have some confusions that you need clarification on or want some more examples, take a look at those. So technique number one is just a summary of main ideas. I think this is the most kind of fundamental, like foundational conclusion paragraph technique. So yeah, you can definitely summarize broadly the details that you have covered. You just want to avoid restating exactly what you have already said, especially in like the intro. You don't want to just copy and paste the introduction, flip it around, reverse it, and just submit it as is. You want to think about a different way to summarize what you have already said. So that's challenging in and of itself. You can touch back on events or facts, very similar to the summary, but it's a little more specific. So you are actually referencing specific details that you had brought up in the story, in your essay. So you can definitely, be specific. It doesn't have to be broad, general summaries. You can quote experts or subjects. So like in the intro paragraph, you can use quotes. It could be a new quote, or maybe you are tying things back to the original quote that you had used in the intro paragraph. You can end with an image. So think like descriptive language, kind of like the anecdote option, or like creating like a little story, trying to leave the reader with an image in their mind. You can point to the future. So you can think about, if you're applying this maybe to real life, you can almost like think about what is the implication for what you had just said for future events. And if you can point to the future, then you can also reflect on the past, almost like reflecting on where have we been. If you're tying this into real life, how does this relate to maybe past events, to put it into context? You can also, I like to call this like coming to a realization. It's almost like an epiphany, like an aha moment. It's almost like you want to save a little bit of the thesis for the very end. So clearly, you're going to specify what the thesis is in the beginning with the intro paragraph, but then maybe there's like an added layer that you want to wait to talk about until the very end. And then last one, really anything that doesn't fall under the category of the first seven, I might call ending with a twist. So there's different types of twist endings. Obviously, figurative language, like the intro paragraph techniques, metaphors, similes, maybe even personification. Obviously, this depends on like the tone that you're going for. If this is a serious, formal academic essay, you might not want to include humor, but humor is always a nice way to make it more of like it almost sounds like there's an actual person on the other end speaking to the reader. And even like rhymes and sound devices like alliteration could always be used as well. But again, it just depends on your purpose. So these are just some ideas. But like if it doesn't fit the tone, it could definitely backfire. So keep that in mind. Okay, so what we're going to look at, and I will post this on the classroom page, we're going to look at 3 sample conclusion paragraphs from three different articles written by the same author. His name is Chuck Klosterman. And he writes a lot about pop culture issues, so like music, sports, entertainment, politics, a variety of things. And he's been published, in a variety of magazines and newspapers. So what I did was I had read this one book by him, which is a collection of his articles, and I pulled out three interesting articles that I enjoyed reading. And we're just looking at the intro paragraphs. So you can see for each one, the intro paragraph is bold. This is his writing. I provided a little summary just so we know what the article was about so that we don't have to read the entire article. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to identify any of the conclusion paragraph techniques that we've looked at. Okay. So what you could do is you could highlight it like you did with the intro paragraph and then just type the conclusion technique down below. So I'm going to do the first one with you, with all of you, model it, and then I'll ask you guys to do the next two conclusion paragraphs. Okay. So here's the first one. This was from an article called The Amazing McNugget Diet. So basically what Chuck Klosterman decided to do was he decided to try to live off of a diet of nothing but McDonald's chicken McNuggets for 7 straight days. And what he was trying to do was write an article about how like McDonald's captures kind of like, it's like the epitome of our accelerated culture. You know, the fact that we need things now, we need immediate gratification, and we're not willing to wait for it. So this was written back in 1996, and I still think, that is holding true. If anything, we probably wait for things even less than back a few decades ago. And so he did it as a little bit of a gimmick to, kind of make it more humorous to decide to eat nothing but McNuggets. And he surprisingly had an overall positive experience, and he learned some things along the way, and that's what his article was about. So here's the conclusion paragraph. I'm not completely positive how many chunks of poultry I ate over those 7 days. The number would fall somewhere between 230 and 280. People have asked me if I will ever eat McNuggets again. Well, of course I will. McNuggets have been good to me. Even before the final chicken came home to roost, my journey had been more sweet than sour. So, coming back and looking at this, right off the bat, I can see that he is, I'll just kind of highlight this first part. He's definitely reflecting on the past. So I'll just highlight this. We'll start with yellow. And he's reflect on past. He's touching back on specific event from the article. And now you can see he's talking about, like, I'm not really sure how many pieces of McNuggets chicken I've eaten, probably somewhere between 230 and 280. So I would definitely highlight this as an example of touchback on events or facts. It's a little bit more specific than reflecting on the past. Okay. Continuing on. So you can see right here, he is saying, people have asked him if he will ever eat McNuggets again. So this sentence, kind of right off the bat, is, almost pointing to the future. Like, how will this event that he is writing about affect his behavior later on? So, point to the future. And then immediately he says, well, of course I will. McNuggets have been good to me. So this is a little bit of like that coming to a realization, or like that epiphany, that aha moment. It's like he saved that for the very end, and he has this like overall conclusion. So I'll highlight that as come to a realization. And then he has this final kind of wrap up sentence. Even before the final chicken came home to roost, my journey had been more sweet than sour. And, it's a little cheesy, but I think it's definitely a creative twist ending, using that pun with the sweet and sour sauce, and, before the final chicken came home to roost, because he was eating McNuggets. So clearly he's trying to be a little humorous at the end. And I think it definitely works. So we can see that even though this is a very short, just a few sentence long paragraph to conclude the article, he's using 5 different techniques here. So he's definitely a skilled writer. He knows what he's doing, and he's tying it together pretty nicely. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is to read the conclusion paragraphs for the next 2 articles. The first one's called Super People, and the next one is called Pirates. So you can see I have some footnotes here because I think there are some references to things that you might not be familiar with or words that you might not be familiar with. So make sure that you read that as you are coming through, along with reading the articles. The first one, Super People, deals with the topic of stem cell research, which stem cells, if you're not sure, are special cells that really have the capability of turning into and transforming into a variety of tissues. So, obviously for medicine, that is really beneficial because you can take that and maybe create certain cells that, under normal circumstances, we would not be able to create organically. But there are a lot of ethical dilemmas revolving around that. So some people don't think we should be going down this route. Other people think we should. And then Pirates is not about the pirate that you're used to with the eye patch and the wooden leg and the parrot on the shoulder. It's pirates as in piracy, like people stealing things. So, we live in this world where technological advances, especially file sharing on the internet, allow us to steal things. And he's kind of talking about how that has moral implications on us. And like, do we even view it as stealing anymore if everybody can download music illegally or download a pirated movie? Okay. So I'd like you to read these 2 and highlight the conclusion paragraph techniques. And we will go over this on Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.